Dr. Todd Severin, welcome to Soup the Podcast.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Absolutely. I am so excited. So, Deadly Vision has been on my to be read list for a while. I always feel bad when there's a book I really want to read, but I've got like the stack of other stuff already booked. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was incredible. For those at home, they can't see this book. This is a pretty thick book. You've probably heard me reference on the show. I struggle with books that are over 250 pages. This was so good, I didn't feel the length of the book at all.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. I think that the length actually was a slight impediment originally in getting it published. Certainly for a debut author where nobody knows who I am, anything that I could bring to the table as far as writing goes, they really wanted to see it around 80,000 words.
Mm-hmm.
The original finished, I'm done draft was 120,000 words. And of course, even querying the concept of 120,000 word debut novel, I felt like an idiot just even putting it out there. So I did a brutal, a kill your darlings, brutal rewrite where I had to get rid of 20,000 words. I set that 100,000 as my goal, but 20,000 words from 120, you're talking a chunk of the book.
Yeah.
And so I was just killing my darlings. I don't need this. I mentioned something, just going through. But since you read the book, and I appreciate your comments, it's long, but it's a complex story to tell.
Yes, well, you've got so many great storylines where, again, it never feels like... Usually when I feel like a book is too long is when, okay, I didn't need X, Y, and Z. And I always... if it feels like it's dragging. But there's never a point where Deadly Vision feels like it's stuck or dragging. The plot moves at a wonderful pace. Your pacing for Deadly Vision is a highlight of the book because you structure the chapters so well where I keep wanting to turn the page in a wonderful way. So again, hats off to you. That is a very important skill to achieve.
Thank you. And I really do appreciate that. That was, absolutely my goal, particularly since the material can get a bit dense.
Yes.
And there is, clearly a lot of scientific material that has to be laid, hopefully within the groundwork of the story as the story is progressing, but for understanding of what even is happening and why there's resistance to it, there's just stuff that has to be laid in there. And I wanted to make sure that moved quickly, that it was a fun part of the story so that you're reading it, you're understanding it, you're gaining a few insights or at least questioning your own thoughts as we're moving through. Because you get a big info dump of science.
Yes.
Talking about grinding to a halt, it's just like it's full retreat. So after that killer rewrite that I did, I hated it because I kind of wound up killing too many darlings.
Oh yeah.
And some stuff just wasn't fleshed out enough. So I found this publisher, Penmore Press, who published the book. And they were actually good up to 150,000 words. Which I thought was
that's
great.
awesome.
So I kind of rewrote it again, and I put like 10,000 words back in. So it's like 110,000 words. So yeah, it's a meaty book. It's a meaty first book. I hope my next book isn't as meaty, but this, the story, I had to tell the story of this main character, and that's kind of just what it took to tell the story.
So before we get too far down the road, would you mind sharing with the audience who is Todd Severin, and then just give a little brief synopsis of Deadly Vision?
Sure. Todd Severin, I'm an ophthalmologist. I'm an eye surgeon, been in practice for about 30 years. I'm also a professor at UC Berkeley. Thank you. I teach glaucoma at UC Berkeley. I am a glaucoma specialist. I did my postdoctorate clinical fellowship in glaucoma surgery, which is only mentionable because that tied into when I started writing the book. That was like my space when I was creating the ideas that came up in this. And I'm married. I have a beautiful wife. I have a son, 2 dogs. And in my spare time, I also run a record company, which is
normal thing.
As fun as it is, the record company actually sprung out of my love of writing.
Really?
It's all, if you looked at my life as a whole, you might see all these disparate little things that seem to be in
Mm-hmm.
totally different boxes, but they aren't. It's one huge
Mm-hmm.
box of just the different aspects
Mm-hmm.
of my personality that I'm constantly pursuing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but in relation, I've realized that my entire life, the one driving thing is I've always been a writer.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's journalism, whether it's medical scientific articles, whether it's nonfiction articles, whether it's health articles, whether it's short stories or poetry, my entire life has always been centered around writing. And the record label came because I wanted to write music reviews. So I created a music review site,
Oh,
and that kind
that's
of
so
just
cool.
morphed into the record label.
That's really awesome. I think that one of the things that, with a medical background, as you know, everything is the human body is an ecosystem. And there's all these disparate elements that have to function together to create a functional human body. I think that creativity sometimes exists in this similar fashion, where you need an ecosystem to foster that creativity. And it has so many different wildly disparate elements, but it coalesces into what is that person's creative passions and drives.
Absolutely. And I find that creativity, if you want to go left brain, right brain,
Mm-hmm.
and if you want to put medicine more towards, the analytical
Mm-hmm.
and the purely dogmatic aspect of life, um, I would die a slow, withering death if that was my entire life that way.
Mm-hmm.
And then I play golf, which I
Mm-hmm.
don't do, or something else. It's that's just too confined in
Yeah.
existence. The part of the goal of life is constant expansion,
Mm-hmm.
constant growth, and medicine is fascinating. And believe it or not, I find a ton of creativity in medicine, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
in how you're approaching a surgical case, or even just being a detective or a spy. That going through the facts and putting things together in a diagnostic, like a
Mm-hmm.
detective way. There's a lot of creativity there, but as a whole, it would be unfulfilling.
Mm-hmm.
And again, my life has always had that other aspect of my brain that is searching and expanding and wants to create to some degree whatever it is that I'm creating.
Hmm. Well, and to that point, one of the major plot points of Deadly Vision is that your main character, Taylor Abraham, he is creating the virtual heart project. He's creating this, he's pushing medicine in this way, and he's experimenting, he's discovering uncharted territory. He's doing a creative process for something that is needs to be rigorously tested with these analytical things, and that becomes a major driving factor in the story, is that becomes contentious. So I think it is fascinating to see where you use Deadly Vision to have this conversation about medical advancements and how creativity plays into the medical field.
Yeah, there's a ton of creativity in medicine. I think if you and I don't want to categorize doctors for
Yes.
reasons why they went into medicine, or even what they do. But I think that if you love what you're doing,
Hmm.
and I don't care what it is, you could be an insurance salesman,
Hmm.
whatever it is you do, if you love it, then that is going to be fueling a certain aspect of creativity, and you're
Yep.
going to be working on how you can further what it is that you love.
Hmm.
Maybe a more creative way of reaching clients, a more creative way of selling your product, or a more creative way of putting things together to serve your goal of serving your clients, whatever it is. That still is creative, and it's expansive, and it's that growth that
Hmm.
fuels your life. You're when you're 80 years old, you're going to be just constantly still growing and fueling
Hmm.
yourself. I would hope. I'm not
Hmm.
there yet. I'm, I'm older than you, but I'm not there yet. And I think that I see the people that, like I said, wither are those that don't
Hmm.
feel that. And if,
Yeah.
if the job is just a rote job, and you're going there and you're
Hmm.
just checking off the boxes, and you're not putting any of yourself into it, which again would be that creative power, it's hell. It would be
Hmm.
hell. So in the book, yeah, the whole idea here was that I had this character who was a very damaged character, which
Hmm.
was integral to the whole
Yeah.
storyline. And he is
Can I quickly
driven.
comment? One of the things I loved about the way you wrote him is that it's not like you instantly exposition dump that he's a damaged character. You let us discover the way that he's damaged. We see how he acts, and then as the story progresses, we pull into the layers of why he acts the way he does. Instead of, oh, this is all of his childhood trauma. Feel sympathy. He does this thing. Story. You actually let us breathe and discover the character in the pages.
Well, thank you. And to me, that's so much more riveting.
Hmm.
As a reader, you can say, well, he was, born a poor child. It's like, but show me his house, which is kind of one of the things that I do, and
Hmm.
not only like, I think that house, his father's house, which
Hmm.
plays a big role in the story, um, in writing it every time, it's just this dilapidated house at the end of the dirt road.
Yeah.
And it's real, by the way. It wasn't where I grew up, but I grew up in that town of Danville.
Oh, really?
Right. Yeah. As I was listening to one of your earlier podcasts that you did with Joshua Moore, who's fascinating, by the
Oh,
way. Oh my God.
amazing.
I mean, to your credit and to Joshua's credit, and this is not an exaggeration, I've watched that particular podcast at least 4, if not 5 times,
Wow.
because he's so fascinating. Your
Hmm.
conversation is so riveting, and you bring this out in him. But I just learned so much from him, and the way his thought process and the way he approaches his writing. And one of the things you guys had talked about is this concept of don't write what you know. And
Hmm.
you had said, write what you know the feeling of.
Hmm.
So, our character goes on the run. I didn't give you the synopsis that you asked for yet, but so Taylor is a medical researcher at San Francisco University, fictionalized, but based very heavily physically upon UCSF, which
Hmm.
is up on Parnassus Hill. And I've been to that center many times. And it's just this great physical presence, the way it sits on the
Hmm.
hill, presiding over the city.
Parnassus Hill.
Parnassus, exactly. And it's like I just had to kind of center it around there. And plus, I'm from the Bay Area, so I know San
Hmm.
Francisco.
Hmm.
And so during the course of this story, Taylor is creating something called the Virtual Heart Project, which is a way of performing heart surgery entirely within the realm of virtual reality.
Hmm.
Something which seems like it wouldn't even be possible, but it's actually quite possible. In fact, in the truth, it'll probably be probable in the not too distant future. And although this is a very revolutionary science and it's fascinating, not everybody's happy with it. And
Hmm.
there's a lot of resistance that happens in the political war zone that is a medical center.
Yeah.
And then it's also elevated to the political war zone that is a presidential election. And as parties are trying to stop him and sabotaging his work, and that's having effects upon the character, eventually he has to go on the run because he's being framed for
Hmm.
murder that he didn't commit. And so I have him running back to where I grew up, which is Danville, and because I know it. So
Hmm.
I didn't write it just because I know it. I wrote it because I know how to express how it feels.
Yes.
And that house at the end of the dirt road, I mean, I grew up, this town was mostly walnut orchards back then, and cattle fields. And I know those houses at the end of dirt roads. I had friends who lived there. I was
Hmm.
shot in the butt with rock salt from a shotgun from guys who didn't want me crossing their property. I mean, it's just that was the town I grew up in. I know you're from a farm town,
Yes.
so I've heard on one of your previous interviews. So to get to one of my best friend's house, it was about a 2-mile walk,
Uh-huh.
or I could cut across somebody's orchard. And the guy didn't like that. So this old man would sit on his front porch in a rocking chair with a shotgun loaded with rock salt. And then it became even more fun to
Yes, it's
cut
a
through his yard.
challenge.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, you're going from tree to tree, right? I mean, again, talk about your adventure books. I'm
Yeah,
cutting
you're a
from
James
tree to
Bond
tree.
agent. You're trying to
Totally.
evade detection.
And I was probably seventh and eighth grade at this time. So I'm what, 12,
Yes.
13. And on more than one occasion, I got a butt full of rock salt. Which doesn't feel good, by the way. It really does hurt.
So secondhand lions. Uh okay, so with that, is there a monastery? Like, there's a monastery you reference near Danville in the book. Is that an actual place?
San Damiano. It's up on the hill, and
Wow.
it's and the way I wrote it is 100% factual,
Mm-hmm.
with the exception of the cottage of the caretaker.
Mm-hmm.
I there is a little house in the way where I describe it, and I never knew what it was,
Mm-hmm.
but in my mind, that's where our caretaker Starling lived. And it turns out that I've talked to people at the monastery, and there really is used for the gardening crew and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think there might be somebody who lives there, but his name's probably not Starling. Um, and I grew up on these hills in
Yeah.
Danville. It's where my particular house was. And I would go to Bear Tree, which figures prominently in the story,
Mm-hmm.
which is at the top of the Las Champas Range. I'd go there a lot with my friends. It's where we'd hung out. It was a small town. There was nothing to do, right? We didn't have a movie theater. We didn't have a fast food restaurant. To go into the big city of Walnut Creek, it was like a half-hour bus ride.
Mm-hmm.
So you're kids. You throw dirt clods at each other. I mean, it's what you kind of do. And we would always hike up to Bear Tree. So Bear Tree is a very special place to us. And to get there, I would cut through San Damiano.
Mm-hmm.
So my whole life was spent in and around this monastery. But what makes it interesting is that the town of Danville has now gotten bigger. It's probably
Mm-hmm.
45,000, maybe 50,000 people now. And we're a suburb of San Francisco. It's not like we're
Yeah.
out there anymore like we
Yeah.
used to be. But I would venture that of the 45,000 people that live in Danville, 44,000 of them don't know that San Damiano's up in the hills.
Wow.
It is a monastery for monks. And they do retreats, and there are
Mm-hmm.
people who go visit it and they'll stay, and it's a beautiful place, but it's unknown. So when I was thinking, okay, I got to go on the run.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how you write, but the way I write is that I am every single character in that book.
Yes.
And I'm into that mindset. When I'm, Helen Yang, the female biomechanical engineer,
Mm-hmm.
I am Helen Yang, even though I know nothing about biomechanical engineering. I had to be her. So when I'm Taylor and I'm thinking I'm on the run, and I've already established that he lived in Danville, but kind of by the design
Mm-hmm.
of what I knew was going to happen, that's where I would go to hide, because very few people, even just down the street, know that you're up there. And so he goes on the run and hides at that monastery.
I love it as a set piece too. One of the things that I've taken away most from recently, I did a reread on some of the Fleming novels, is having these unique locations that stick out in your mind for things to happen. Having that set piece backdrop. Or in the case of like the James Bond movies, the volcano lair. Having places like that,
You only live twice.
you only live twice. Having places that stand out in the mind are really great to have stories set in. So the monastery comes up, and I'm like, oh, that is such a great location for things to happen and for the characters to kind of orbit as we get closer and closer to the climax of the story.
Yeah, thank you. I thought so too. And it was a special place to me. It's still, you know, 5 minutes from my house, and my wife and I will go up there several times a year, and it's just a peaceful place. It overlooks the whole hillside, the valley. Mount Diablo's across the valley, and the fountain where Taylor and Sherilyn are hanging out when they're being hunted. That's real.
Oh,
Um, Lights really do come on, and so it was really, to me, it's kind of like tying the whole thing together with aspects of my own life, because
hmm.
as a writer, and I'm sure you approach it the same way, is that in being each one of these characters, there are aspects of your own life that you are hopefully healing or having
Hmm.
grow as you're writing about it. And so there's a lot of similarities between Taylor and I. And so as I was resolving his story, in some ways it was helping me resolve part of my own story.
Hmm.
For example, at Bear Tree, there is a plaque. It is not a plaque to Taylor's brother, but it is a plaque to my best friend who died when I was
Oh,
19 years old. And there's a car crash, and
oh.
three
Hmm.
people from a very small town died within 2 weeks of each other. And we were all from the same high school. We all grew up
Hmm.
together. And so we mounted a plaque up at Bear Tree as a way of honoring them. And
Hmm.
so, of course, it was easy for me to then just honor my friends by using that to honor,
Yeah.
you know, the character in the story.
I think that writing, I joke that instead of therapy, I have writing because really when you there's a thing called I think it's actually called narrative therapy, is the concept of being able to essentially take the story and write it because it allows you to process it in a specific way. I have used that with some of my books. My first two books were rom-coms, and there's definitely a degree of like that early 20 dating angst that shows up in that book
Right.
because those were the things I was dealing with at the time. And I could use the characters as leverage points for writing about these are the things that I see as like vaguely an impartial observer, but also an active observer of how relationships work when you're perhaps a little cold, selfish, and heartless. So I enjoy the fact that writing presents that opportunity. And one of the things I think you did again did a fantastic job at with in Deadly Vision is the drive for work that Taylor has and his relationship with his wife and how that kind of butts against each other. As a newly married man, already I'm like, I get this. This is a real thing that I
Yeah.
can emotionally relate to because you have the driving passion that this needs to be done and I need to do it for reasons I can't even entirely articulate. But then at the same token, you gotta keep house.
Right. Well, and nothing works if you don't.
Correct.
Um,
Everything
and
disintegrates if your base is what's it? Sun Tzu's like secure your base first. Okay,
right.
wait, and correct me if I'm wrong. I want to make sure I'm fact checking this because I've read a lot of books within the last couple of months. So forgive me if I'm mistaking something that you wrote with what someone else wrote. Do you
Sure.
have someone quote Musashi instead of Sun Tzu at some point?
I'm pretty sure I'm a Sun Tzu guy.
Okay, so I did see Sun Tzu.
I'm pretty sure I'm Sun Tzu.
I enjoyed that. I like that you have characters that are referencing these great thinkers in your book.
Well, um, so a lot of points to bring up just off
Yes,
what
I
you
know.
said. First
Sorry,
of
I
all,
just threw things out
no, I
there at
love it.
you.
I love it. Because it's fun to talk about writing, and again, I'll refer to Joshua Moore again, who is a professor and he teaches graduate students, and he thinks a lot about writing. He thinks a lot about crafting,
Mm-hmm.
um, and he can throw out wonderful quotes of people who are endeared to him as writers. And I can't. you know, that's not, I teach glaucoma. So if you want to know about a trabeculectomy, let me know. I can get into a great deal on that. But
Okay,
when
can
it
I
comes
quickly
to
say that I think that's one of your strengths in writing this book is because you are a teacher, you understand how to take very complicated medical gobbledygook to the average person like me, and you do a good job of giving us that, but in a version that I, as someone who goes, oh, I don't quite understand everything that he's describing, but I understand enough to get the point. So again, good job.
well, thank you. And Michael Crichton is totally my model on everything. The greatest compliment I've been given as a writer is that my writing is I'm being compared to Michael Crichton and Dean Koontz.
Mm-hmm.
I think Koontz because of the quickness of the
Mm-hmm.
prose. Now, I've not read Dean Koontz, so I can't speak to that one. But the Michael Crichton, boy, I mean, that's
You definitely hit those marks for me. Like I've read a handful of obviously like Jurassic Park, and then he wrote a bunch of stuff that Hard Case Crime published from when he was a medical student.
right.
And you do such a great job of it's not that you're mirroring his style, but I can feel enough similarities where I'm like, oh, if someone wants a Michael Crichton itch, TD Severin is your next great author.
Well, and since Michael has left us, um, I would love to fill that void. I mean, that's obviously my goal. I was in the time of writing this, I was definitely immersing myself in Michael Crichton books, and all of them, even like Rising
Mm-hmm.
Sun, which isn't
Mm-hmm.
as scientifically, medically based as some of his other stuff, but he still drills down into technology so
Mm-hmm.
well. Jurassic Park, the technology, everything about it, you're learning and you believe it can happen.
Mm-hmm.
And my books will be along that same line. They're all going to be based upon a scientific principle, in this case,
Mm-hmm.
virtual reality, and how that could work within medicine.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to take that principle of science or medicine, and you're going to twist it.
Yeah.
And in doing so, you're going to discover what the worst possible outcome could be. And most importantly, how that affects the characters.
Mm-hmm.
If there's anything that I might have approached differently than Michael, and in no way am I saying
Mm-hmm.
I'm superior to Michael Crichton, who's a legend, but his characters tended to be a little bit more rote. They were
Yes.
kind of stock. They
Yes.
were there to serve the
Mm-hmm.
story.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas my approach is going to be that the only thing that's interesting about writing this tweak in technology is how it affects the character.
Yes.
So even though my books are going to be scientifically driven first,
Mm-hmm.
I would still like to say that they're character-driven books, which is one of the things that I've been very happy that reviewers have been commenting on.
Mm-hmm.
Particularly, Taylor's story arc. There's a lot of people who are just really on board with the believability that this
Mm-hmm.
guy is going to be so driven and he's going to keep pursuing things despite his whole world falling apart around him, which is
Mm-hmm.
exactly what I wanted. I love the stories where somebody's life is systematically dissected and ruined one
Yes.
step at a time. It's like, okay, you
It's
lose
like the
this,
story
you
of
lose it.
Job.
It really is. I mean, and it's a classic, in the heroic journey,
Mm-hmm.
that every aspect of this guy's life is just falling apart. And in fact, with Taylor, we take him to the point where even he can't even trust his own mind anymore, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I drive my main character pretty insane.
You do. To your
It,
credit, like you aren't pulling your punches. Taylor does not have plot armor. Taylor is literally bloodied by the time this story ends, and I, as a reader, appreciated that because it made what he went through mean more than if he just, got hit with a bullet and just powered through it.
you know, and I'm a huge James Bond fan too, right? I grew up watching James Bond. I used to go. One of my best childhood memories is going to see James Bond movies with my dad.
Oh,
It
that's
was
so
like
cool.
he and I didn't see a lot of movies together, but if there was a new James Bond out, I mean, we were always there. And by that I mean starting with
I was gonna say, do you remember what your first one was?
it wasn't Doctor No, but it might have been You Only Live Twice. It might have
Mm-hmm.
been Thunderball.
Mm-hmm.
I don't quite remember the exact sequence that those movies came in. I didn't see From Russia with Love in the theater, but I did
Mm-hmm.
see, the original Thunderball, You Only Live
Yeah.
Twice. And certainly, I remember sitting there watching Diamonds Are Forever. Not the best of the James Bonds, but still James Bond.
It was my first James Bond movie, and for that reason, will always have a special place in my heart. Jill St. John will never leave my mind or my heart, but Sean Connery doing this is also a treasured memory of my childhood.
And to me, James Bond is Sean Connery.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay, I was curious. Starling is described as Scots. I could not imagine an aged Sean Connery in that role. I'm thinking like the untouchable Sean Connery, but it with a Scottish accent instead of trying to do an Irish one for reasons that are inexplicable.
Right.
Was that your intention, or was it just for fun?
I'll be honest with you. That was just for fun. If
Okay.
there was a character that I wrote, but thank you for that compliment, by the way. If there was a character that I wrote that was absolutely 100% undeniably based upon an actor, who his speech patterns, his appearance, his gravitas, his ethical component to everything that he does, it is Bennington Crawford, the chief of staff at the hospital,
Hmm.
who is absolutely patterned after Morgan Freeman.
Oh,
Um,
yes.
yeah, I mean, to the point that I hear Morgan Freeman's voice
Hmm.
when I'm listening to it, which is putting me in this quandary that now that the books can be made into a movie, Hollywood, is anybody out there? Should it be made into a movie? Morgan's 30 years older than when I wrote the first draft of this book. I wrote the first draft of this book in 1994. There's a journey to this
Wow.
novel,
Okay, I
right?
would like to point out to the audience, just this is going to make you feel really old, so I'm sorry. I'm going to tear the band-aid off. 1994, I was born in 95.
Okay,
For
so you didn't write it
perspective,
yet. So you
no,
weren't writing in
I
1994.
wasn't
Okay,
writing in 1994. So for perspective for the audience, that's how long this book has been gestating. And can I just give you again a huge compliment? it shows that you put a lot of effort into writing the best book you could because this is a really good book.
Again, thank you so much. I really, and to hear somebody like you say that, who reads so much, as evidenced just by the bookcase behind you right now, um, it means a lot to me. I mean, you know the feeling. You invest.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, blood, sweat, and tears isn't the right words for it. It's you invest an aspect of your soul
Mm-hmm.
into this, and you talk about ripping the Band-Aid off, and of course you're referring to the age, but to me, turning the book in is ripping the Band-Aid off,
Yes.
because now you are naked, you are
Yes.
exposed. You know, if you watch that Naked and Afraid show, you are naked and afraid. You are someplace you had
Mm-hmm.
never been before. You have no
Mm-hmm.
idea what's going to come around the corner. You don't know if they're going to like it. You don't know anything. You don't know if it's the worst thing ever put onto a piece of paper.
Yes.
You kind of like it. You can't trust your friends. You can't trust
Yeah.
family. You know, you can't trust the editor that you've been working with because they've been getting paid along the way.
Yeah.
You just put it
Mm-hmm.
out there, and then you just have to be naked and wait.
Mm-hmm. And the more of yourself and the more honestly that you write it, the harder that is because intentionally or not, the truth is if you are going to write a book that is filled with that genuine part of who you are, that is it's what makes people want to read you, but it's also the most terrifying thing on earth because what if they don't like it? And
Right.
it becomes that, like you said, naked and afraid. We had Jim Towns on the podcast recently. He wrote a slasher novel set in a nudist camp. I can't think of a more accurate depiction of like seeing Goodreads reviews sometimes for books. And I'm
Right.
like, oh.
Well, I'm thinking about what you just said. Your first couple of books were rom-coms, and you'd base them essentially upon your own life and your own experience as a 20-year-old in the dating world, which is an incredibly different time than me being a 20-year-old in the dating world. We didn't have cell phones. We didn't have email. I mean, different world. And it's your experience that gave your books the verisimilitude,
Hmm.
and it's you, who you are, that would give it the emotional vulnerability that it's worth reading. Because I don't think there's a lot of books reading that don't have some emotional vulnerability to them.
Hmm.
It's kind of like the problem with Superman as a character.
Yes.
It's so hard to write a
Hmm.
really good Superman story because you can't kill. I mean, they came up with kryptonite, come up with something, but it's weak.
Did you see the latest movie?
Not yet.
Okay, I just saw it last night, and I
Okay.
will go on record as saying I think this is so we can segue into talking like golden age comics and pulp here at this point because I think the thing that I enjoyed about this movie is it pulled that golden age aw shucks golly part of Superman out. Like it
Okay.
brought that to the surface and really depicted him getting beat in a way that reminded me of the John Byrne early Superman reboot from the 80s. And
Right. Yeah.
then it reminded me a lot of what's the Superman the Animated Series was a show that I think did a lot of great distilling of what the Superman mythos was right at the start. This mirrors that, and it's a Superman who can't move the earth with a push. It's not the Silver Age overpowered. He's someone who can get beat to a certain degree, and you see him get put through the ringer. Which, to your comment, I think we're also segueing around James Bond stuff. I think in the books they do a good job of showing a character that has to go through hell. Versus the movies, he's kind of untouchable.
Right. Did you ever read the Jeff Loeb, Tim Sale 4-issue Superman series, Man for All Seasons?
No.
Find it.
Okay.
It came out 90s, back when
Mhm.
Tim
90s were
Sale
the
and Jeff.
good time for
Good.
Superman.
90s were a good time for comic books because
Yes.
what happened in the 90s is that you had, and I am a bit of a comic book historian, as I think you might know. So after the Golden Age died, uh, and it died when the war ended and
Hmm.
the soldiers were coming back, and they didn't want to read
Hmm.
about superheroes. They certainly didn't want to read about Nazis. They
Yeah.
wanted crime. They wanted sexy. They wanted horror, and that's the way comics went. And it went as extreme as it could until the Comics Code Authority was formed,
Mm-hmm.
because the congressional panels were linking all these comic books to juvenile delinquency. And so comic superheroes died completely. Comic books kind of died completely until, like, I think it was 1959 when the Flash came back and showcased #4. And that kind of led to
Mm-hmm.
the classics Golden Age heroes of DC coming. And then, of course, Stan Lee resurrected what was going on over on the Marvel side. And Stan Lee's approach was totally different. It all comes back to that emotional vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the DC characters of the 60s were totally plot driven.
Yes.
They'd come with a new plot, and Flash is going to do it, Green Lantern is going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And over on the other side, I mean, you have like the first resurrected Marvel comic was Fantastic Four #1,
Mm-hmm.
which I think was 1960. And here you had Ben Grimm, who was bathed in pathos.
Yes.
And he's been turned into a rock-covered monster. And he doesn't want to be it. He's not just slam bam. He's not just clobbering time. It's, I'm miserable. I can't, later on he has a girlfriend and he can't feel her touch. And it's, I mean, that's taking writing down to that emotional, vulnerable essence. And it's that sort of vulnerability which Superman can still show, even if he can't necessarily be killed easily.
Yeah.
He can be killed. But emotionally,
yeah,
there's a character. It's not a human, but there's a character in there, and Tim Sale and Jeff Loeb really do that well. And what happened in the 90s is you started having all these people who grew up with the 60s comics, the resurrected, but now they're adults, and now they want to write, but they're older, and they've already kind of gone through the gee whiz sort of stuff, and they want to write deeper characters. So you get like the Watchmen and all this stuff coming out. We are really starting to explore the psyche, and that's again what we're always trying to do when we're writing our books. With Deadly Vision, I needed to really be inside the psyche of that main character, and to play off one of the things you said about the way his backstory kind of unfolds. I think that one of the things that is really neat is that his wife is actually learning about it all at the same time that we are. He was a locked door. He did not talk about his past. In fact, in the very first chapter where you see their apartment in San Francisco, there's a little throwaway sentence, but it had to do with the second bedroom. And I referred to the second bedroom as filled with her Southern furnishings and his few mementos from his childhood that he cared to own. A room he very rarely ventured into. And it's thrown away, and you're just gonna read right past it, and you're just gonna, he's describing the room. There's some shit in there, but it's really not. I mean, it's a room he never went into because it had the few childhood mementos he cared to own in there. And it was just a little foreshadowing, not an effective one, so I don't mean but a guy, but in my mind, it did. It foreshadowed what's coming.
It does. Well, and something that came up in, I think it was the interview with Ryan Pote. I can't remember if it was my interview with him or someone else's. He made a comment about you want to, he described it as like waterfalls. Essentially, you want to start that drip of something that's going to build, layering it in. So by the time, like, it's teased in one chapter and that's actually paid off in the next one. But you don't have to do as much introduction when you bring it in because there's a small part that's already been mentioned in a previous chapter.
And I think that if you write well, things like backstory and things like the scientific principles behind the Virtual Heart Project, they really can be just dribbled in. And they can be dribbled in a way that is understandable without loads of the backstory to understand what I'm talking about, but actually draws you more into it. Because it's like, if you get like all the science at once, it's like, okay, cool. I think that you said in one of your previous interviews, you Googled it and you told me everything about it. Yeah, well, okay, cool. So, now we're on the same page. It's like, no, it's like, let's see how this goes. And in this particular book, since the concept of virtual reality heart surgery is clearly so foreign, the big scene in this one was the Grand Rounds.
Yes.
Where he has to stand up in front of a very difficult, very skeptical audience of doctors at this medical center and administrators, some on his side, most against him for various reasons. And he's got to describe what this thing is and what it can do. And that was an amazingly fun scene for me to write. And I probably rewrote that scene 15 times because it couldn't be too heavy.
Hmm.
It couldn't be too didactic.
Hmm.
The conversation that is sparked by it could not be too cliched. It
Yes.
had to be based in some sort of a reality. Um, and then I had this other challenge, which is if you've ever sat through a medical lecture or a medical grand rounds, it's I mean, how much can you write a scene about a guy clicking slides with a screen behind him, right? I mean, you just can't do it. So I had to
PowerPoint.
come up. It's right. I mean, that's what it is. And it's not PowerPoint. When I first started, it was the carousel, the 35 millimeter slides, and you always had them in backwards so that projected upside or whatever. That older than you, um, and that was where things were. So I had to come up with a way, and you can let me know if I succeeded or not, to break that barrier
Hmm.
of just being this totally cut and dry medical lecture. And that's where I threw the whole thing into this holographic presentation,
Hmm.
where I could then have him, showing the helmet that is the neurotranscendence system, which takes the place of virtual reality goggles. But then I could have the beginning of him stepping into this virtual recreation of the heart,
Hmm.
which I hoped somebody reading it would go, "Oh wow, that's kind of, can they do that? You know, can they really do that?" Which then leads to when the technology is actually used for the first time, and he
Hmm.
actually is inside of a patient's. In this case, it's a pig at first, but in a real beating heart.
Yeah.
And then that came, to what you had said before, which is don't write what you know, but write what you can describe the feeling of.
Hmm.
Or as Joshua Moore says, don't write what you know, but write what you're trying to understand.
Yes.
And then you have to put yourself, okay, so if I truly was standing inside of a coronary artery,
Hmm.
what a concept that is, first of all, right?
Yeah.
What would it be like? And I mean, granted, I think it was Bradbury who wrote Fantastic Voyage back in the 50s, which was made into a movie with Raquel Welch, which my wife and I watched on the occasion of Raquel's passing, because it's a classic. And it kind of touched upon this, right? Did you ever
Hmm.
see Fantastic? The
No,
little,
I've heard the concept because of course it's dribbled into the zeitgeist over time, but
yeah, it has become part of the zeitgeist. But so they get miniaturized to cellular level in
hmm.
this spaceship. They get injected into this person's arteries where they need to go to his brain. They need to
Hmm.
stop something before he dies. And in some ways, you can almost think of the Virtual Heart Project as being an updated version of Fantastic Voyage, and I'm perfectly okay with that because, in essence, we're doing it. But the difference is that I actually have the guy in the blood vessel. He's not
Yes.
inside of a ship. And so I had to imagine what that's going to be like. How do
Hmm.
you describe that? And I very quickly realized that was going to be one of the main cruxes of the entire book, because if
Yes.
going inside of the heart is not fascinating to you,
Hmm.
the book's not going to work. You have to feel like you're inside that blood vessel, and you have to be wrapped up in, okay, while he's doing this laser is following him, and this is going to happen, and just how freaking cool is this, until it goes wrong, but it had to happen that way. So
Hmm.
um, I know the anatomy of a blood vessel, and I know what it's like, and I know what the inner body smells like. I've been there. So I just tried to wrap up all of those senses as best I could, and without overdoing it. It
Hmm.
had to be a little, but not too much.
It was picture perfect for me, where I felt like I could actually feel it in that sense where you described all the senses for what's going on. It, the way that it's written, you feel like he's being buffeted by waves in a lot of senses. As someone that grew up by water, I instantly just felt that sense of being immersed
Right,
in a
right.
literal sense. And so you did a great job. Also, it's a great set piece part of the book where if the trailer, like the movie trailer was made for this, the
Thank you.
end, like the end scene, the end part of the trailer would be that moment where he's there and then all of a sudden things start to go wrong. It really does have, you described as with Michael Crichton, we're doing medical stuff. I think it really works where the science is right there, and then you start to see where the science goes wrong, and that is a perfect scene that shows not only that moment in Jurassic Park where they in the movie see the dinosaurs. That's what that moment is when he first starts doing this, where you really get the sense of, oh my goodness, this is incredible. This pushing of boundaries in technology and this the feeling of this is how the human body is made.
Right, right. I mean, first of all, wow, thank you. I mean, I would never claim to be, that moment because I saw Jurassic Park, the original, when it first came to the movie theater, and I remember sitting there. And actually, it was during my again, it was during my fellowship year, and I was with my fellowship advisor. We went to the movie together, and the first time that you see that dinosaur, because I mean, there had been stop motion before.
Hmm.
You can go to Sinbad or whatever. Even King Kong, you go as far as you want. But there was such a fakeness to it
Hmm.
that you had to just love it and pretend that it was real. But when you saw that first dinosaur, or when Laura Dern is touching the Stegosaurus, I think it's the
Hmm.
Stegosaurus, and she's got her hands on the belly, wow! Like my mind was blown, and I definitely did want to have some sort of that sensation that this is something that's never been done before.
Hmm.
This is a concept that has never been explored before. Is this even real? And I want people to question that. Can this happen? Can
Hmm.
this really be true? And the answer is yes. Just to back up a little bit, and I don't want to take up too much time on this interview, but I said that the novel started 30 years ago,
Hmm.
1994, so when I had the first idea. And the original idea was, virtual reality was such a very new concept, and as was
Hmm.
artificial intelligence. But I wanted to explore this concept of this duality of existence. So
Hmm.
when you're in virtual reality, if it was more advanced, you would actually be living a life which
Hmm.
is different than the life you're living when you're not in virtual reality. So you would have this sudden duality of existence. And I wanted to play with how that could affect somebody, how that could
Hmm.
truly affect their life. How could the virtual reality influence on their brain affect their real world?
Hmm.
So the original
You're
portion of the
describing
book,
social media in a lot of senses too, unfortunately.
well, and that's the era it is. And that was actually part of the problem with the book, is that when I wrote it, and I wrote the first draft in 4 or 5 months, it wasn't that hard for me. And I went through the revisions, and I probably was working on it revision wise, the whole thing, maybe 18 months to get the first draft done, the final draft done. And I got an agent, Elizabeth Pomada, who was in San Francisco, and it made the rounds through all the major publishers of New York. And I think it was Betsy Lerner, who was at Warner Books at the time, wrote me a very kind letter. And she said, this is phenomenal. I love what you've done here. It's just not like anything I've ever seen before, but it's not like anything I've ever seen before. And you're writing about virtual reality and artificial intelligence. And in 1994, this is science fiction. I go, it's
Hmm.
not science fiction. This is a medical thriller. Everything, even
Yes.
in 1994, I knew everything I'm writing about, this can happen.
Hmm.
This is a grounded in science medical thriller. And she goes, well, it's medical thriller, it's cyber thriller, science fiction. I don't know what to do with it. And so I came back for revisions. And so I took it back and I got rid of a lot of the virtual reality aspect, because before there was more of happening in the virtual reality, because I really wanted to play with his brain that way. And I got rid of a lot of that and I turned it more into what you see, which is the more tapping into his fear-based memories.
Hmm.
His pain is
Hmm.
what comes forward, and recentered it more within the medical center milieu. And then at that point added the next level of politics, because
Hmm.
one of the interesting things I found out, and as a writer, this, the best antagonist is not an evil person.
Correct.
The best antagonist has to be somebody who is every bit as right in their beliefs as anybody else's. They just believe from a different angle. Now,
Hmm.
if you're writing a serial killer book, that's fine, but that
Yeah.
serial killer should probably still be sympathetic for because something made that person that way.
Hmm.
Unless you're just going off and writing somebody's absolutely deranged, which is fine if that's what
Hmm.
you're writing. But the best antagonist has to have a belief for why they're just wanting something different than what the hero wants.
Hmm.
And that led to this whole concept, is that to me, this is so cool. How can anybody be against it? I mean, I had to really think about it. Why would somebody say no to this? But there had to be a no, or else you don't have a thriller.
Hmm.
Um, And that's when I got into the whole medical ethics, and I really
Hmm.
started delving deeper into medical ethics and created the PSCM with the Physicians for Socially Conscious Medicine, which is very pertaining to today's age.
Hmm.
And there are, lots of medical groups who would maintain positions like what we discuss in the book. But the concept was that, can we afford this? Where
Hmm.
does hyper medicine go? What does hyper technology do to us? And it brought up that the scene that I mentioned from the 70s when dialysis was first introduced, and it was great. It was a lifesaver for people with end-stage kidney disease. And as soon as dialysis was really available, the budget immediately swelled up to billions of dollars, and this is 1970s dollars. And they realized very quickly they could not afford this, and they had to come up with a way to determine who gets dialysis and who doesn't. And they created the God committees, who essentially would review each case and decide if you got it or you don't. So they would tell you basically if you live or you die. And that is something which is kind of creeping back into medicine again today, with
Hmm.
the limitations and the
Yeah.
budget constraints of what we have. And so that became the foundation of the resistance to what I
Hmm.
think still is pretty cool technology.
The way that you weave this political intrigue into Deadly Vision is phenomenal. It's a great way of you do a good job of, like I said, pacing. So it it comes at the right rhythm often enough in the story to inject this different flavor to it, where we feel that continual resistance pushing, and that creates the tension of Taylor doesn't know that this is headed his direction, and he's doing his best to try to like manage the actual thing, not knowing that a bus is about to hit him at a certain point.
Right, and it's constantly foreshadowing the upcoming danger
Hmm.
that again he does not know he's in. Um, and we can talk about craft, and you're a plotter, you're a writer. And one of the things, again, I keep going back to Joshua. I just loved that interview,
It was a
but
really
he
great
talked.
interview.
Oh, it was phenomenal. And he's local here. He's in San Francisco. I should probably
Oh.
track him down somewhere. Um, but he had mentioned teaching his graduate students about being promiscuous with process on how to
Hmm.
write. And I found that to be really fascinating. In today's day and age, I'm on TikTok, and there's all these writing influencers and book talk people, whatever, and they're doing what they're doing. And one thing that a lot of these writers will do is, well, these are the programs that help me. And they'll go through and I use this, and I use Scrivener here, and I use Google Docs here, and I use the plotting's done here, and I use AI to come up with character name, or whatever. And they have all this stuff plot out. And I'm working on my next book. This is my next book.
I love it.
That's my novel.
That is awesome.
This
Yes, for
is
the analog.
this is the heroic journey that is going to be discussed. And so I create the journey. So I have it plotted out. I need to have a framework,
Hmm.
particularly if a book this complex. I needed to
Yes.
have a framework. And then it was also important to me to understand that each of the characters has to have their own growth arc also.
Yes.
It can't just be Taylor that grows.
Hmm.
And it can't. And in this particular book, Taylor's not really even the strongest character in the book. I mean, he keeps himself going,
Hmm.
but his wife Sherilyn is the strongest character. She is the backbone upon which he's capable of resurrecting himself. But
Hmm.
I needed that growth arc to go through, Malcolm, the computer wizard, and then his relationship with Helen and her growth arc as she goes through, and even the bad guys. I mean, even Bennington Crawford goes through a
Hmm.
growth arc as he's approaching this topic, and even the big baddie, which is the senator, McIntyre. He goes through a growth arc of his own because he never intended things to be as bad as they were. He
Yeah.
got caught up. Everything keeps getting caught up, and then at the end he doesn't even realize that he's been played the whole time anyways.
It's such a good chef's kiss moment because again, casting in our minds, I'm immediately thinking of the gentleman that was in Brian Cox. I see Senator McIntyre as Brian Cox
That'd be good.
from Colin, what's the show everyone was it was in the zeitgeist for a bit, the family fighting over money. Um anyway, people know Brian Cox. They've seen him in play
Yes,
stuff.
yes.
Uh phenomenal. Just again, I see that betrayal, that portrayal of someone that is very in control, in command, and then slowly sees this is not going the way I planned it. And oh, his comeuppance is really good.
Thank you. I mean, that was brutal. It's as a writer, and I'm sure you, again, you all have your own processes. That's the structure
Mm-hmm.
of what I'm going to be doing. That's the same structure I used for this book.
Mm-hmm.
And I would do, in order to tell that heroic journey, there's obligate scenes that have to happen. Like this must
Mm-hmm.
happen, this must happen, this must happen for this major point to happen. So I
Yes.
took all of the obligate scenes, I put them onto a 3x5 card.
Mm-hmm.
And then underneath that 3x5 card, I do a little note for what the research would be that's going to come up in that
Mm-hmm.
particular scene. So that's the structure. But as you know, when you're writing, even though it's plotted, I and I'm not one of these kind of foo-foo metaphysical writers,
The
and I don't believe in
story breathes into you.
I don't believe in the muse. I think that when you write, you write. You know, it's a decision, and you
Mm-hmm.
just write. And yeah, some days you don't write good, and some days you don't know exactly where to go. But when you have these 3x5 cards, I always know what's next.
Yes.
You know, and then I can revise it. Right,
Mm-hmm.
writing is rewriting. We all know that.
Yes.
Um, but I'll tell you, certain things as you're writing, they just do evolve. So
Mm-hmm.
the goal for me was to have the structure, and then to have each of my character arcs also on 3x5 cards, and then I can work the cards to interplay them so that the
Mm-hmm.
story is linear in the way that I
Yes.
want to tell it, but it still leaves a lot of room for, okay, I didn't expect this.
Mm-hmm.
I know we're running out of time. I just want to get to one interesting point, which I think you'll find interesting, and that is that through the many various revisions of this book until some major point, and you have to understand that I put the book down in 2010,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't touch it for 15 years
Wow.
because I was running the record label and I
Yeah.
was expanding my practice. I was kind of busy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so talk about putting it in a drawer for 6 months. I put it in a drawer for 15 years, which was good. You bring it out, you can see that
Yeah.
sucks. That's like, whoa. And there's a lot of things I didn't even remember writing, which was the most fascinating thing to me because that was something that was breathing kind of
Yes.
spontaneously within the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's one of the greatest thrills
Mm-hmm.
is yeah, I'll get a little metaphysical, I'll get a little foo-foo, a little musy, but the story does breathe. If I
Yes.
think if you're doing it right, it's not so
Mm-hmm.
constrained that there's no room for breath.
Correct.
Um, so in the first two versions of the book, the team was Taylor and Malcolm, the computer genius, and that was it.
Oh.
Helen didn't exist,
Mm-hmm.
and she didn't exist all the way up until many drafts of the book, until I was rereading that grand round scene. And there's a
Mm-hmm.
moment in that scene when the doctors in the audience just start pelting questions at Taylor on stage, which he loves. It means that they're interested. And one of the questions the doctor asks is, how does the laser move inside of the real patient? And it's integral to the story because he's in virtual reality. All of
Mm-hmm.
his movements are being tracked through the computer. And
Mm-hmm.
inside of the real patient, a micro laser is positioning itself exactly in relationship to his position in the virtual recreation of the heart. And that's got to happen that way, or else all you're doing is virtual reality simulation. And I said, how does it move in the body? And I sat back, I wrote that question. I sat back, I go, gee, how the fuck does it move inside the body? To me, it had just been a MacGuffin before. I never even
Mm-hmm.
cared. It moves. Trust me, it moves. And then I realized
Buy
that,
in.
yeah, just go. It moves. And it's like, how does this thing move? And then think about it. How is it going to
Mm-hmm.
move? Well, you can't have a propeller. That's going to make cavitation bubbles.
Mm-hmm.
That'll kill you. You can't have it crawling on the vascular lining. That would irritate it, which would cause spasm, which would kill you. So how's it going to move? And so I started just studying animal locomotion, and then I got into fish locomotion. And then that led me to create the Kelly Research Building, which led me to create Helen Yang
Mm-hmm.
as the biomechanical engineer who's the robotics specialist who studies fish propulsion, in this case, particularly shark propulsion, which would work as a model. And now you read the book, and she became such an integral character from that
Mm-hmm.
moment till the end. Her developing relationship with Malcolm to me is sweet.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote it, so of course I can say that. But it's key to Malcolm's growth as a
Mm-hmm.
character, and she plays a moment up until that very last, conclusion. Hopefully, so I don't know how the book would have gone without her.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but that was an area where like the whole concept just kind of writing itself. Even though I asked the question in the book, I wasn't prepared to answer that question. So when I reread it, I said, I better answer this question. And which to me was just fascinating.
Well, I feel like that's one of my favorite parts in the rewriting process is finding that extra something that in the second of my rom-coms, I was having trouble figuring out how to stick the landing on certain character beats. And I was like, really, there needs to be a more immediate foil here. And I just randomly introduced the main character's cousin. She shows up to town, and everything that the main character is, she kind of plays the opposite in a lot of senses. And that foil relationship, even though she doesn't play, she just kind of is in the background in a lot of cases, just immediately brought it more to life for me. And it's
Absolutely.
amazing how supporting characters can do that. And this is why I maintain I'm always more interested in the supporting character Oscar than the main actor Oscars.
Yeah, I would say that Malcolm is probably most people's favorite character in the book because he is so, I mean, he's such a character. I mean, from the first
Yes.
moment you see him writing on the wall in crayons, it's just, this is Malcolm. This is who he is. Um,
I love that he has the chocolate addiction, like the increased levels of cocoa in the chocolate is like charting how he's doing, how he's handling the stress.
right. Until
Because it's so
he's ready for,
human.
right, right. Yeah, well, I mean, and that is what we do. I mean, he wasn't going to drink. Well, at the end, he does take a bit of scotch from Starling. I mean, he's not a drinker. He's a computer nerd. You know, that's just not who he is. But but his character growth arc to me was really fascinating. And then the biggest challenge for me is that I did have all these disparate
Hmm.
things happening, both with his family life, with his marriage, with his work, with the
Hmm.
research, with the killer, with the politics. And I didn't want to do a drawn out ending.
Yeah.
I didn't want to take care of these systematically. I want to do it
Hmm.
all at once.
Hmm.
And other than the fact that Ross is dispensed with a little bit earlier, how could I get it all done at once? And that was satisfying. And again, it was just at the moment. It's just this is how I'm writing it. That part was not necessarily planned.
Hmm.
It's just these are the pieces. This is how it's got to end, and hopefully that worked off with the payday.
I think it worked phenomenal. One of the questions I like to ask writers, and obviously we've talked a little bit about process, but do you have a writing routine? And if so, what does it look like?
I do. Um, in order to do the things that I do,
Hmm.
I there's only so many hours in a day.
Yes.
So my only option was two things. Number one, do not waste any time. Be
Hmm.
incredibly efficient with everything that I'm doing. So there's no lunch breaks. There's always something because the record label takes a lot of time also, right? Um, Believe it or not, the medical practice when I'm on lunch doesn't. I might have some phone calls to make or something, some emails to address or some charting, but for the most part, that lunch break becomes okay, record label time, or right now promoting the book time.
Hmm.
But so become incredibly efficient. But the other thing is to add more hours to the day. So I get up every day at 4 a.m.
Hmm.
Um, rain or shine, Saturday or Sunday. Today I was up at 4 a.m. I go downstairs, I feed my dog, I have my coffee, my breakfast. My wife's still asleep. So that then gave me a
Hmm.
couple of hours to get work done before I had to jump in the shower and get ready for work. And that became so ingrained in me that that's just my life now. Even on holidays, I'll still get up at 4 a.m. and there's something for me to do.
Hmm.
Um, so I like it. And I happen to be somebody I'm a better morning person than I am an afternoon person.
Oh,
So
interesting. Yeah.
well, and part of that's programmed into you, I think, through medical school, because medical school
Hmm.
always starts, at 7 a.m. Surgeries always start at 7:30 across the board. So you
Hmm.
got to be on. You can't be in the operating room at 7:30 and say, okay, that cup of coffee should kick in about 10. It's like, no, what am I looking at here? Can I touch this sort of thing? You got to know what you're doing, and and the same basic concept when you're on call.
Hmm.
You're woken up at 2, 3 in the morning. You don't have time to be groggy.
Hmm.
Doc, we have, blah, blah, blah. There's motor vehicle accident, guys in the ICU. We need you to come down and examine whether a globe's been ruptured, blah, blah, blah. What? It's like, you're up. So I just I wake up early. My wife
Hmm.
hates it because she's not a morning person. And I'm like, I'm talking a mile a minute. I'm awake. Honey, let's take on the world. Let's nuclear propulsion. Let's do something. And she's
I will say
not
I
that
didn't
way.
think I was a morning person until I got married, and then I realized that by contrast, I am. So I understand what you're saying.
So my perfect routine would be to get up, do most of my writing from 5 a.m. until 10ish, 11ish.
Hmm.
I start to get a little bit tired. I get hungry first of all, and then take a break. Be with my wife, go get a nice lunch or something like that. In the afternoon, maybe spend another hour or two editing, because
Hmm.
I can rewrite. I just
Yes.
can't write.
Yeah.
Or in this case, book promotion, because publishers aren't doing a whole lot of that these days.
That's the thing I think that most people don't acknowledge when they go about the process of writing and publishing is that it does not matter where you fall at in indie or traditional. Your promoting the book is now a part of your work.
Right. Right. And I've noticed that I took, in learning to write, and I was one of these people, I wrote my novel before I realized I should probably learn how to write a novel. So I wrote my novel, and then I started taking workshops. And I took workshop with Tess Gerritsen and Michael
Hmm.
Palmer.
Hmm.
Michael's passed away, but they're brilliant medical thriller writers. Tess is more than that, but she was at the time still mostly in her medical thrillers. I took a fabulous workshop with Robert Dugoni,
Hmm.
who was a great writer. And I took a bunch of UC extension courses from UC Berkeley. So just as I was trying to understand the craft, because there is no doubt there is craft. There just has to be.
Hmm.
Um, and in going through all that and in trying to piece all this information together and learning how to write, that's where you come up with your process of what's going to work for you.
Hmm.
They were fabulous teachers for me. I bless them all.
Todd, this has been a fantastic conversation. Where can people go to learn more about you, your work, and get their hands on? Oh, my tchotchkes are falling off the book. Get a copy of Deadly Vision.
Deadly Vision, of course, it's on Amazon. TD Severin are my initials. That's what I'm writing under. So it's on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, all those sorts of things. And you can get caught up to date with me at tdseverin.com, which
Hmm.
is my webpage. And I do have a blog that I maintain through that webpage. I'm on all the socials, TD Severin on Facebook. I don't have Twitter, but I do have Instagram, and I do have TikTok, which I'm learning. That's a whole nother world.
Hats off to you.
Um, and then I do have the record label
Hmm.
website, which is
Hmm.
ripplemusic.bandcamp.com.
Hmm.
It has copies of the book that I integrated with the record label by doing a CD.
Can I just say that's so cool? Like, how many other writers can or would do that? You did it, and it's awesome.
Well, and the amazing thing about it is that there's 11 songs on here. I think 5 or 6 of them were written specifically for this. The other ones
Wow.
were singles that bands had written, but they had never been released in any form. And it just, from the beginning, it tells the story of the book. It's not a listening soundtrack while you're reading, because I get
Hmm.
distracted. I like quiet.
Yeah.
But it's a compliment. And so it
Hmm.
starts off with a band called Baracho. And I don't know if you ever heard the music, but it starts off with the heartbeat, boom, 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 which is on the bass guitar, boom, boom. And it's like, it just sets the tone, and it goes all the way through. And I can actually tell you, like, this song is like when he's in the heart, and this song's when he's going crazy. And it ends with the song from a Finnish band called Cranium, which is called Sweet Relief, which is, the ultimate redemption.
Yeah.
And so they're the geniuses. All I did was, hey guys, this is what I'm thinking. And they produce. I have amazingly talented people I work with. But anyways,
Hmm.
ripplemusic.bandcamp.com. The books are there. They're all signed because I control
Hmm.
that one. And if you wanted, you can listen to the CD or pick it up too.
Awesome. I will link all of that in the show notes. Thank you again for coming on the show.
I'll get you a CD if you want one.
I'd love one.
It's a little bit heavy, but I'll send it your way.
Perfect.
Okay, Terrence, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. This has been an absolute blast.